Whilst for more of this, I'm joined from Melbourne by the Chief Executive of the Australian Retailers Association, Paul Zahra. Paul, I can't not ask you about my previous guest. You experience the ups and downs of retail and small business. It's horrific in Victoria, bad in New South Wales, 180 days though in Victoria.
Well, look, unfortunately, the story we just heard is common, and it's devastating to hear, small business particularly doing it really, really tough. And that's what we're dealing with right now, and particularly those small businesses that are actually based in the city of Melbourne, because, of course, this is their fifth lockdown. They were suffering before the current lockdown had actually hit. But, of course, these businesses were decimated because of the lack of international tourists, the lack of international students, people working from home because of COVID. So we're looking at occupancy rates around like 25%. So you can imagine that cafe, that small business, that family-based business operating at the bottom of a tower block, being able to sort of be pushed down and get back up again. There's a point where you say enough is enough. And I think that's where we're at. Small business is being totally decimated right now.
Well, the reports are today that the worst is yet to come. I tell you, I don't know that it could get much worse. You drive around the inner sort of suburban belt of Melbourne, you go down Chapel Street, you go down Smith Street, you go down Hawkesbury, any of these areas, worse as you get further out. Every second shop is a for lease sign. I mean, the businesses are gone.
This is it. And a lot of these businesses will not return because they've just been so deeply damaged. And, a lot of the business support packages that we're seeing, whilst we're welcomed, often they are deferral of rent or deferral of payroll tax. And this, of course, is just a mounting debt that small business can't afford to pick up on. So some people have purely just given up. So unless they've been able to pivot, if they've got a business that can pivot to an online or a click and collect, and that can be a little bit tough for small business, then, unfortunately, we're asking them, hopefully we're doing our best to try and keep them going. But some people have just given up, unfortunately. And yes, expect to see more vacancy rates.
Yeah, well, Russia makes a point that she's losing $12,000. That's her overheads, not her profit loss. That's long gone. But $12,000 a week. She gets $3,000 if she's lucky for the whole of the lockdown from the government. She hasn't even got lockdown force money, as you heard all of that. What needs to happen? Because, we're going to have a longer lockdown than originally decided in Sydney. Well, fingers crossed we're out of it in Melbourne, but, previous form tells you that's not likely. No. What do you need now for these businesses?
Well, look, what drives spending is actually confidence, and what drives confidence is certainty, and we don't have a lot of certainty. So we're seeing these lockdowns popping up around the country. We've got New South Wales, Victoria, and now South Australia in lockdown. And what we do need, Peter, is a national framework, which is what we don't have. We have a very different definition by state on what a lockdown means. We have a different definition by state on what a hotspot is, a different definition about what essential shopping is. What's been seen as essential in Victoria is what's been seen essentially in New South Wales. So it leaves retailers scrambling for the answers, and it becomes a real problem. So we do need, until the vaccination rate is up to an acceptable level, we do need a national framework to manage this. And unfortunately, we're at the behest of each Premier's decision-making at the moment.
I know, but we've got a national cabinet. We're 18 months into this thing. The idea that framework isn't already done. No business, Paul, would operate 18 months into a crisis without having got their hands at least around the problem. My concern, if you look at the numbers, the downturn in June and the predicted downturn in July in retail, I think people are worried at home. I think that idea that they were spending and helping business last year, I think they're concerned about their own job security. I think household incomes are tighter than they ever are now, even if people have work. And I think that's in part the worry, your point about confidence.
Well, that's true. But I also think I've explained this. For some of us, we might think it's Groundhog Day, but it really isn't, because we're going to these sets of lockdowns without the safety net of JobKeeper, without the safety net of a leasing code, which helped a small business particularly negotiate outcomes with their landlords, without the safety of industrial relations flexibility. So all these safety nets that were put in place through JobKeeper, which I might say the federal government did do a damn good job of, because it actually protected business and also got people spending. We were really set to be the stars when you think about our performance just generally, but unfortunately that's not the case now. We're not really clear on the vaccination program, and until the vaccination rollout has occurred and we get to an acceptable level, that will give people confidence, and that will also stop the lockdowns, I say.
And just before we go quickly, why such discrepancy between supporting in New South Wales and Victoria?
What do you mean? Supporting as in...
A greater amount of support in New South Wales for business than they were
Well,
seeing?
look, I think that's as in business support packages?
Yes.
Yeah, so I think that comes down to the state government's decision making, and I think you've got to, in New South Wales, it'd be fair to say that it's a Liberal government that's very pro-business and has avoided and actually have been very proactive in trying to keep as much of business and retail open. I don't think we could say the same thing in Victoria, and I think that talks to different sort of strategies or different policies, I guess.
Well, that's very diplomatic there, Paul. Zahra. Thank you for your time.
Pleasure.